Welcome back to Extraordinary Women TV. Before I introduce my second guest, I have a special announcement. If you're an author, you're going to want to hear this. I'm going to be speaking at an event called the Story Behind the Story event on how to get publicity for your book. So if you're an author, you're going to want to come out to this. The event is in conjunction with IC Publishing and Friends, hosted by Women for Women and IC Publishing, Saturday, June 18th at the Delta Markham Hotel. It's going to be a day of insight, motivation, education, networking, and of course, learning how to get publicity for your book. So we'd love to see you out there. My next guest is Kelly Drennan. She is a social entrepreneur and founder of Fashion Takes Action, a nonprofit organization that works with fashion-based businesses to help them become more sustainable. She's based in Toronto. Welcome, Kelly.
Well, thanks for having me today.
It's really great to have you. Now, this outfit you're wearing is very cool. We were talking about it before the show. Of course, we can't see all the details on the camera, but this is what you're wearing is an example of eco-fashion.
It is. It's a Toronto-based designer, Thieves, who's down on Queen Street West, and this is an organic cotton dress that you can wear about 20 different ways.
Right.
So I think I've mastered about 6 or 7 different looks so far, but it's really fun to wear, and talk about longevity.
And of course, what you can't see is Kelly's got the tie around her waist, which actually acts as sleeves, long sleeves.
Long
is that right?
sleeves, so you can wear this as a long sleeve garment. You can wear one long sleeve, one short sleeve, so it's really versatile. I mean, you really could get it in black and a color, and wear, between the two of them, just wear them every day. Nobody would know any better.
Now, what is eco-fashion?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's not a simple definition, and in fact, experts globally are really scratching their heads to come up with a unified definition for it. At Fashion Takes Action, we define it in a number of ways. It means, first and foremost, it doesn't look any different than conventional fashion. I think that's still a bit of a misconception that it's not as fashion forward, it's not as stylish, when in fact, we're now seeing sustainable fashion on the runways internationally in New York, in Milan, in Paris, and in London. Secondly, it could mean that it is made from organic materials or non-toxic materials.
Right, yeah.
It could also mean fair trade, so if it wasn't made locally, which is also another element of sustainable fashion, is locally made.
Sure,
but
reducing
if not
the
locally,
carbon footprint.
Exactly,
right.
Which also supports the local economy. But if it isn't made locally, then as long as it was made overseas, then it was made fairly. So the workers were actually paid fair wages to make the garments. It could also mean recycled or repurposed clothing or upcycled garments, so taking something old and turning it into something really new and fantastic. There's a couple of designers in Toronto who actually take old men's t-shirts and turn them into really fun dresses. And then there's Pre-Loved, of course, who's sort of been pioneers in this movement for over a decade, and they take old men's old pants, trousers, jackets, and turn them into really funky, stylish pieces. It could also mean vintage and secondhand, which is really great for the consumer who's on a budget and wants to do something for the environment, but doesn't necessarily have the extra income to support something that was made organically or fairly traded. And then finally, it means slow fashion, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later on.
Sure, we'll talk about it later, yeah. Now, of course, it's Canadian Environment Week, so it's perfect timing to have you on the show.
It is, yes, thank you.
Now, who are some of the hottest eco-designers that we should watch for?
Well, Canada has a growing number of eco-designers, which is really exciting, and I actually just, Fashion Takes Action just did the Green Living Show, and we had an emerging designers boutique there with over 20 Canadian sustainable designers that have been in business for under 5 years. So in the 4 years that I've been in this space, I've seen a huge growth. There was maybe 1 or 2 designers 4 years ago, and now we're looking at probably upwards of 60 in Canada. So some of the hottest names are Thieves, like who I'm wearing today. She's really been a pioneer of this movement. And out in Vancouver, actually, Nicole Bridger is also really hot. She won, we did an award last year called Design Forward, which was the first eco-fashion award in Canada, and Nicole Bridger was the winner of that. So she won. It was a combination of experts in the industry who were selecting the winner, as well as the public, and so she won overall.
Oh, fantastic. Well, when I was doing my research, I was looking at a number of the different designers. I thought, the fashion, as you said, I mean, you would never know. I don't know if there's a preconceived notion that it's supposed to be not interesting, or somehow you're supposed to be, looking like you're hugging trees. I don't really know. But what I saw was fantastic. really great, fashionable clothes out there.
Yeah, and I think that notion comes from the fact that 10 years ago it really was hippie sort of wear, right? It was a lot of hemps that, technology has advanced so much now. Like we're seeing hemps. Still, and it's a really popular and great fabric, but we're seeing it now blended with silks. So you can get red carpet gowns made from a hemp silk. So it's really just about awareness, and hopefully with the help of the media and events, we can really spread awareness for the fact that sustainable fashion looks fantastic.
Yeah, it sure does. Now, what inspired you to become interested in environmental issues to begin with, but particularly as it relates to fashion?
Well, I've always had an inner hippie. I've been practicing yoga and eating and sort of living a life of health and wellness for many years. I love camping and canoeing, rock climbing. But I found myself, I started up a PR company about 10 years ago, and my focus was primarily on fashion and lifestyle brands. So I worked with a number of designers.
Right.
And then, as time went on, we worked together on a number of events, and I started doing Fashion Week for them as well. And I really just, got a behind-the-scenes look at what goes on, and was sickened by the waste. The bottles of water just overflowing out of the garbage cans, the amount of light that's required to light a runway, the hairspray and all the products that are used backstage on the models, all the paper that goes on the chairs. Like, it was just overwhelming. And I guess it was after the birth of my second daughter, I had recently seen An Inconvenient Truth. And I think that was my first aha moment, where I thought, I had already given up bottled water and using plastic bags, and I just thought, this isn't enough, and the planet is in crisis, and I need to do something. I need to have some sort of a legacy as well for my daughters, and peace of mind knowing that I did my part in helping to create a planet that is sustainable and that they can live in.
Now, who is or has been your biggest influence in shaping where you're going with your business and what you're doing?
Well, it's interesting. I think it comes from a few different places. I think my kids inspire me greatly. They're definitely the key motivators behind everything that I've done towards in the sustainable fashion movement. But I've also been fortunate enough to form some really strong connections to other environmental leaders here based in Toronto, who've acted as friends, advisors, mentors, and in some ways we're all coming at this from a very similar place, and we all share similar challenges and struggles, and having that support network has been absolutely key, and I'd say it's definitely another motivator for me.
Now, let's just talk a bit specifically about Fashion Takes Action,
Sure.
your organization. And your URL is fashiontakesaction.com. Is
That's
that right?
Mm-hmm.
For anyone who wants to go visit your site. Well, what does it do?
So, well, first of all, it formed out of, again, sort of going back to my first aha moment. That was when I realized I needed to do something.
Inner hippie.
Yes, the inner hippie in me was coming out, but at the same time, so was the fashionista. So I knew the executive director of the time at Environmental Defense, who is still the executive director, and I thought, I wonder if it would make sense to do some sort of fashion show fundraiser to raise awareness for their great organization, and at the same time put a spotlight on sustainable fashion. At the time, again, there weren't very many designers doing this, so I used conventional fashion designers, so the ones who show at LG Fashion Week, because I also thought, wearing my PR hat, I thought, what's going to get the biggest draw in terms of media attention, in terms of industry turnout? So we put on Canada's Greenest Fashion event back in September of 2007. And it was called the Green Gala, and it was a huge success. And I wasn't anticipating, actually, the success that it was, because I was getting phone calls and emails from designers and other fashion-based businesses across the country looking for resources. How do I find recycled buttons, or is there such thing as recycled zippers? And I was a publicist, so I really didn't know the answer. So after doing a little digging around, I discovered there is no organization out there to support this movement. And we did another Green Gala the following year, and then by April of 2009, on Earth Day, we actually launched it as a members-based organization. So we now provide resources and tools to the fashion industry and helping them become more sustainable. So that's everything from discounts on eco-friendly fabrics to sustainable business coaching. We do workshops. We're going to be offering a whole series of webinars on topics like fair trade and sustainable sourcing, ethical sourcing, and things like that.
Now, just to ask you, when we talk about sustainable fashion, what do you really mean? If you can maybe just elaborate a little bit on what does it mean to be sustainable?
Well, I think it's first recognizing the many challenges and problems that are facing the conventional fashion industry. The average consumer really isn't aware. For example, one cotton T-shirt requires 400 gallons of water. That's 7 full bathtubs of water. A pair of jeans is 1,200 gallons of water. So when you look at water being fresh water as a scarce resource, then that's a big problem. And the fashion industry uses a tremendous amount of water to produce the fabrics, but also in the dyeing. And then you're looking at the wastewater that happens from the dyes, and a lot of factories, especially overseas, are not responsible in how they're disposing of this wastewater. So it's just being dumped out into the environment. It's affecting ecosystems and biodiversity and fresh drinking water for a lot of small villages who don't have access to fresh water. So that's a huge problem. Sweatshops is another big thing.
Right.
If you were to call up the U.S. Department of Trade and Labor, they'd tell you flat out 50% of apparel factories in the U.S. are sweatshops. So I think there's also a big misconception around the sweatshop, and I think people think for the most part, if they still exist, they're overseas. I can't see them. They're not here. They're not in my country. They're not in my own back door. When in fact they really are.
Right.
So, yeah. And so I think, once we are armed with that knowledge, I think it helps us make smarter decisions. And slow fashion is another thing that is really big in terms of what we can do as consumers.
And we're going to talk about that we're going to take a quick break.
Sure.
And we'll talk a bit about slow fashion after. But before we take a break, I would love to ask you what your top tip is on creating a successful life. And I know, Kelly, you would have a great answer.
Yeah, well, I think that for me personally, having a holistic approach to life, to business, to family, recognizing, when the times are tough, listening to your body, and really, taking the steps that are required to stay healthy and to stay happy and to keep as much stress out of your life as possible. So I try and look for balance by diet, yoga, spending time with my family, and I think that's really key to being successful.
Well, thanks for that. Sounds like great wisdom to me. Well, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Kelly Drennan, eco-fashion expert and founder of Fashion Takes Action. Welcome back to Extraordinary Women TV. I'm joined by Kelly Drennan, who's the founder of Fashion Takes Action. We're talking about eco-fashion and of course it's Environment Week, so it's perfect timing now. Slow fashion, which is something we just touched on before the break. Mm-hmm. I know that slow fashion is becoming not trendy, but people have a greater awareness of it. What is it? Well,
it's funny. I think a lot of people are hearing a lot of the slow food movement. So it's not too far off from that. The slow fashion movement really, from an industry perspective, means that the industry needs to slow down production to really focus more on creating quality garments, spending the time, attention to detail and craftsmanship that goes into a garment. But it's really tricky because the fashion industry is typically known for producing 2 collections. So you have a spring, summer, and a fall, winter collection. And the designers will work really crazy to get those collections produced. But what happens is that the demand isn't necessarily there. They're mass producing these garments, and there's a lot of wastage left over. So slow fashion really does mean focusing on slowing that part of it down. But from a consumer's perspective, it really means that we need to be investing in our wardrobes. We need to, really slow things down, buy fewer pieces, buy timeless classic pieces that are going to last us 5 or 10 years. Unfortunately, the media dictates these ever-evolving trends. So one season it's a pointy toe, then it's a round toe, or it's a skinny jean, and then it's a wide-legged jean. And really, in order to keep up, most of us can't afford to be buying the top-of-the-line quality pieces to keep up with those trends. So we flock to fast fashion outlets. But the problem with that is that most of those garments are cheap. If you think about something like $10 dress, what is really the cost of that dress, or you know, who was paid and what were they paid to make that dress. And the fact is that it's either so trendy that in 6 months you wouldn't be caught dead wearing it, or after you wear it a few times, it's going to fall apart. Buttons are going to fall off, thread's going to come undone, it's going to lose its shape. But we really don't care because we only spent $10 on it. So we go out and buy more. So there's this sort of overconsumption that's happening, and it's sort of really in our DNA. And really that needs to change. And we need to be thinking more like the Europeans do, and investing in pieces that are going to last us a lifetime. Like in this dress, for example, even pieces that, you know, up front you might spend a little bit more money, but we need to sort of move away from this I want it, I got it mentality, and save. You know, if you see something that you like, covet it, spend your money, and then go out and reward yourself and buy it, instead of that sort of instant gratification that we tend to feel from shopping, you know, retail therapy, right?
Right, yeah, retail therapy. Now, it's Environment Week. How are you going to be celebrating it?
Well, you know, it's funny because it's same like with Earth Day. You know, I try and live a sustainable lifestyle throughout the year. We're raising our children in a sort of very eco-conscious, you know, home where we don't have battery-powered plastic toys from China. We eat healthy and sustainable and local food. We obviously recycle, reuse. So, you know, we use Environment Week, of course, and especially because it's being addressed in schools, to really, you know, bring that conversation to the dinner table. But aside from that, really, it's just continuing to do what we're doing all the time.
Now, you something we touched on earlier was you talked about a little bit about some of the challenges, but what have been the greatest challenges that you've been facing in terms of specifically this organization and your work? Yeah,
well, starting a nonprofit is tricky, especially when we didn't really know that we were a nonprofit when we first started out. When I started up Fashion Takes Action, I had my PR business and I kept that going. And so I was often pulled between the two worlds and juggling quite a bit. There were the Big Green Gala events that I did, sucked a lot of my time. I was working probably 100-hour weeks for a good year. And with 2 small children, it was quite stressful. You know, it got to a point where it was impacting my sleep. And I had my first experience with insomnia, which I don't know if you've ever experienced, but when you're in it, you know, the first couple of weeks, I don't think you really recognize the toll it takes. But I actually went through about 2 months of not sleeping. And as a result, I mean, everything just sort of collapsed. You know, it got to a point where I just woke up one day and just couldn't do it. I couldn't continue. And I think that it took a lot of soul searching and digging, you know, deep within me to find, you know, the strength to really rise out of it. And I think that is the sign of a true entrepreneur. I think that if you can manage those tough times and be resilient to a lot of the stresses and the challenges, then you will be successful. I attribute a lot of that, though, to my network. I have an amazing supportive network, and it's both my family, my husband, and as well as my peers and my colleagues in sort of the sustainability world. So without their support, I don't know what would have happened. But I definitely was able to, you know, rise up and reinvent and pick up the pieces and move on.
Isn't that the story of many entrepreneurs? It's reinvention, and often the changes aren't made until there's absolutely no choice but to make a change. And you know what? And change is good. You know, I really think that changes are great, because as scary as they might be, they definitely open new doors and I think lead to greater success. So through this whole process, then, has your view of success changed? And how would you define it today? You know, it's funny. I think maybe when I was 10 years ago, I think I would have thought of success as measured in, you know, by financial gains, right? So to be successful meant you had to have the 5-bedroom home and, you know, the 2 cars and the cottage. But, you know, the reality is that doesn't matter. I mean, my views have changed. I'm happy to live in a small home that's energy efficient and drive, you know, very little. But I think success is for me, it's knowing that I am making a difference, you know, and seeing
a market transform, and knowing that I have had some sort of an impact on that. And if I do a lot of public speaking, so if I'm in a room full of 100 women and only one of those women the next day decides I'm going to change the way I shop after hearing me speak, then that's successful.
If there was one change in the world that you would like to see, I've got to ask you this question.
One change.
One change in the world that you would like to see happen in your lifetime, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Well, specific to the fashion industry, I would like to really just see this become mainstream. I would really like to see, consumers have so much power, more power than we realize, and that power resides in our wallet. So I think, between the consumer demand and the industry smartening up, I would really like to see in my lifetime sustainable fashion just being, so that the word sustainable doesn't even exist anymore. It just is.
Now, before we wrap up, do you have any tips, any pieces of advice that you would like to share? To be dressing eco-fashion? Maybe dressing more, eco-fashion, yeah.
Well, again, I think, it's slowing things down, right? So, number one, investing in your wardrobe and buying pieces that are going to last you 5 or 10 years. The second thing is buying secondhand and vintage is a really great way to offset those costs. And you're saving garments from landfill, so you're still doing good by the environment. So I think that's a really great way for somebody who's on a budget, who wants to buy ethically produced products but can't necessarily afford them. And I also think that fashion is an expression of ourselves. So if you really do care about the planet, then what better way to show how you care than through how you dress?
Love it. Well, Kelly Drennan, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate your time, and all the best with Fashion Takes Action and all that you're doing. So good luck to you.
Thanks.
Again, just a special event that I'd like to announce. If you're an author, you're going to want to know about this. I'll be speaking at an event this upcoming Saturday, June 18th, called The Story Behind the Story, with IC Publishing and Friends, hosted by women, for women in IC Publishing, and I'll be speaking about how to get publicity for your book. So if you're an author, you're going to want to come out to that. More information on my website at extraordinarywomentv.com. Well, for more information about my show, of course, you can visit the website at extraordinarywomentv.com, and that's also where you can find my contact information. Special thanks to my friends and family for your ongoing support, and to the folks at thatchannel.com, and to Cindy Miranda and Jennifer Wu, who are my assistants here today behind the scenes. Thank you to you. If you're interested in transforming your life, I hope these stories have inspired you. You've been watching Extraordinary Women TV. I'm Shannpon Skinner. See you soon.